Oh, Miss Stacy, I didn't see you there.
Oh, Johnny, it's nice to see you too. Have you finished your report on Transcendentalism?
Actually, I was wondering if you could give me a private lesson.
Oh, of course I can. Why don't you take a seat over there so you can have your first lesson on what is Transcendentalism. Transcendentalism is a literary period between 1820 and 1860, and it was at a time when authors like Margaret Fuller and Ralph Waldo Emerson focused on writing within the individual. It was when they wanted their writing to reflect what oneself believes. So like David Thoreau, he wrote a book called Walden, and it was a series of essays where he talked about himself and how the world within itself was made around the individual. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. So, you mentioned multiple authors. Does this include women?
Oh yes, men and women both played major roles in the writing of the Transcendental era. Specifically, Margaret Fuller, she played a major role in the contribution of the literature of the time. She wrote The Dial, and that was a massive piece of literature, and it was extremely important. And she was great friends and colleagues with Emerson and Thoreau.
Interesting. What was the writing style of this time period?
The writing style differed. For example, in Thoreau's Walden, he wrote in an essay format, and it was very scholarly, but it was written so that the common man or woman could understand it. It wasn't so much pedantic as it was commonplace. It was like semi-formal. But then in Emerson's nature, it was extremely formal and almost hard to understand if you weren't educated or a scholar. And also, the writing was very centered around nature and itself, as I said before. It was all focused on oneself. It was very one mindset. Do you understand?
Yes, I understand. What form of writing was popular in this era?
The writing at this era, there was multiple types. For example, there was poetry, as shown by Emerson's The Snowstorm and Concord Hymn. And then also, a poet you might recognize who was strongly influenced by the Transcendentalist era is Edgar Allan Poe. And also during this time, they tended to write essays based on themselves. So like with Thoreau's The Walden, he wrote a series of essays while he lived up in the cabin all by himself. And Emerson, he wrote Nature. Well, he didn't actually write Nature. He wrote the essay Nature, and that was an essay, but it was transcendentalist-based.
That's very interesting. What genre was it in?
Well, the genres were mainly nonfiction, but there were a little bit of fiction mixed within. It was normally based on accurate interpretation, or what they believed to be accurate at the time, of the oneself, of the individual. They believed that you were all part of a soul, a great soul, but then each person was part of it, and this rallied the people of the time. So normally the genre was nonfiction, but then sometimes there was a splash of fiction within it.
What historical events occurred in this time period?
Well, during history at this time, there were quite a few events. At this time, they were trying to abolish slavery. And in fact, Thoreau, he was put in prison as one of the first peaceful protesters. And Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. soon followed suit. And also, at this time, they were fighting for civil rights. They were fighting for women's rights. So it was a very empowering movement, not only to women, but also to African Americans, the Chinese, just pretty much everyone. They were looking for equality within the South.
Thank you, Miss Hastings. I have enjoyed my time with you.
No problem, Johnny. No, would you please leave my office?
Thank
오빤 강남 스타일.
So, you say that
강남 스타일.
네.
낮에는
Oh, yeah.
따사로운 인간적인 여자. 커피 한 잔에 여유를 아는 품격 있는 여자. 밤이 오면 심장이 뜨거워지는 여자. 있는 여자.
Well, the writing styles often differ. For example, in Walden, it was in the SI style, S-essay. So, the writing style
밤이 오면 심장이 터져버리는 선어해.